Welcome. Welcome to those who may be watching this live stream. Today, we are happy to share background information and the rationale for the proposed range for a tuition increase. The student community was given the opportunity to share their comments in person by completing a Qualtrics survey link listed on the JMU homepage or by emailing the board secretary at jmu.edu. We did not have anyone request to speak at today's meeting. Any comments received electronically will be shared with the board, and I have a stack right here. Now we'll turn it over to Tawana Moore, Vice President for Administration and Finance, to make the presentation. Tawana.
Thank you so much, Madam Rector. Before we talk about the range of tuition increases, I wanted to go through a few of our successes and to point out what students are getting when they're paying to have an education here at JMU. And we have a lot of really positive information to share. The first one is that 91% of our first year undergraduate students come again for the second year. So our retention rate from first year to second year is very high. If you compare that to the national average, it's about 77%. So we're significantly higher. We have a 94% student satisfaction rate, which we're very proud of, and a 17-to-1 student to faculty ratio, with the average class size being 25 students. Another important factor for students these days is a work-based learning opportunity. And I'm happy to say that almost 80% of our students have at least one work-based learning opportunity, and about 40% of our students have more than one. We also have strong and consistent career outcomes. 95% of our undergraduate students either have a job, go into the military, or go into graduate school within 6 months of graduating from the university. And it's 97% when you're looking at graduate students. And then we look at some of the rankings that we have. We are in the top 50 for the nation's best college value. This is the Princeton Review. We're in the top 25 for the best undergraduate teaching, according to U.S. News and World Report, and in the top 70 for best colleges in the United States, according to the Wall Street Journal. So very proud of those. And I think you'll see when we start talking about the way the university is funded and where we fall with our sister institutions in the state, these rankings and percentages and rates of satisfaction are even more impressive. So our current budget is $824.7 million. And these bar graphs kind of show you a little bit about where the money is within the budget. The 35.3% of the money is in tuition and fees. 23.9% comes, that's general funds. Those are support dollars from the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that's what the state gives us. 33.8% is auxiliary enterprises. Now, auxiliaries are self-supporting entities on campus that don't receive any sort of support from the Commonwealth or tuition dollars. They have to support themselves completely on the fees that they charge the students for the services, or if it's a comp fee. And then finally, 7% is in sponsored programs. This is just another graph that kind of shows those different categories. And you see that biggest one is the purple, the education in general, which is 54% of that E&G total budget. But I want to call your attention to this box over on the right that shows that 66.6% or 66.6 cents of every dollar that's in our E&G budget is actually spent on teaching and learning outcomes for the students. So it's the faculty, it's the library, it's all those things that go into our students getting their educations. And then you see the smaller amounts here at the bottom, the institutional support, physical plant, student services, those percentages of things that support E&G areas. But by and large, 2/3 of the money goes to educate students, which is our mission, and it's exactly what we should be doing. This chart shows a little bit of history for the support that we've received from the Commonwealth through the years. The one to the far left is in 1998. When I first came in 99, the state actually was funding almost half of the expenses that we had on the education and general side. If you fast forward to 2011, if you remember in 2008, there was a recession, there was a lot of things going on in the economy, and the Commonwealth couldn't afford to fund us at the rate that they had. And so our support dropped to 28.9%, and we became much more dependent upon tuition. And then if you fast forward again to this year, our general fund support is now at 38.4%. So the Commonwealth has tried over the past several years to increase our base funding, which we greatly appreciate. It certainly does help. But there are some factors that are out of our control, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that do force you to have to increase. This chart is an expenditures on the education and general side. I show this chart just to show where the dollars go on the education and general side. And if you look at this pie chart, the purple, gold, green, and orange, all of those pieces of the pie make up 73.4% of the budget, and all of that is people costs. Those are all personnel costs. We are very personnel heavy, obviously, because we're a residential campus. We also have our students in the classrooms. We have some online, but our students by and large are in the classrooms with people here teaching them. And so we have a lot of personnel costs. So the area that we can actually work with in terms of efficiencies and savings is the red portion. But then if you look at this bar chart further out to the right, this top blue box is 11.3% for financial aid. So we don't want to mess with that. So really you have about 15% of that E&G budget that you can make adjustments to, aside from laying someone off to make efficiencies. And we have done a lot of that. So I'm very, very proud of that. This chart shows our support from the Commonwealth in our general fund support, as well as our support for financial aid. So the dark purple is the general fund support. The lavender is financial aid. If you look, you can see all the way to the far right that if you add those two together in terms of support from the Commonwealth, JMU is dead last out of the 15 institutions in the state. And you can see these bullets. If you look, we received $2,935 less than the average of the four-year public institutions. The average support that they get is $12,297. So we're significantly less than that. And it applies to financial aid as well. And then we take that chart and then we add the cream piece of it, which is tuition. And our tuition is 11th lowest. So even though it's not at the very end in terms of the amount of tuition we charge, when you put them all together, because of the being last in general fund support, we still rank the lowest in terms of our support for a full-time equivalent in-state student. So the fact that our outcomes and our satisfaction rate are as high as they are given our funding is pretty remarkable. Now let's switch gears and talk about the auxiliaries for just a minute. The auxiliaries, as I've said before, are those areas that are self-supporting. So they're dining, parking, bookstore, housing, those sorts of things. On the left-hand side is all of the revenues that come from the auxiliaries. So the biggest piece of that is the comprehensive fee that students pay, followed by the board fee on down through parking. If you look at the expenditures, you'll see expenditures on this side of the house that you don't see on the E&G side, because auxiliaries are responsible for everything, all costs associated with their operations. So you're going to see some debt here. You're going to see an agency service charge that they have to pay back to the institution, and their utilities, all those sorts of things. So our biggest expense is dining, which stands to reason. We have one of the biggest dining programs in the country, and then it goes on from there. So how are tuition and fee decisions made? And we are currently in the dark purple portion of our process. So we go out to everybody, all the departments, and they tell us what they need. That's what happens to the far left. We talk about enrollment trends and pressures, everything they need. It comes in to the budget office. We do some financial alignment, and we talk about affordability. We ask people, you know, how can you save? What can you cut? All those sorts of things. It goes through a leadership review portion. There's a public comment period. And then it'll move forward next week to the board review and approval, which will happen at the board meeting next Thursday and Friday. So why are these increases necessary? There's some pretty heavy cost factors driving some of our increases. The biggest one is this top one, the salary adjustments to ensure competitive compensation for faculty staff. The Commonwealth has not passed their budget yet, so the House and Senate are still trying to figure that out. And so what we have is that the Senate has proposed a 3% mandatory pay increase for all state employees. The House has proposed 2%, so we don't know which way that's going to go. So we built in the 3%, the worst case scenario, to make sure that we have planned appropriately. So that's a huge cost for the institution. On the E&G side, the 3% salary increase is about $8.5 million, and we'd have to come up with roughly half of that. On the auxiliary side, it's about 1.6. So, and then they've increased benefits by 13%. So that's a significant expense to the university. So it's for E&G, it's I think like $6.2 million, which again, we'd have to come up with about half. And again, for the auxiliaries, it's around 1.5, 1.6 on the auxiliary side as well. So those higher fringe benefits are they're just something that we have to do. We don't have a choice. Inflation increases. The CPI for inflation was 2.4 for this time period, which is what we would normally look at. But as you know, what's going on in the world with the increases in gas, increases in energy prices, we expect we're going to see it in food. We're going to see it everywhere. There are some very real inflation increases that we're having to cover. Specifically, the bus contract for us is going up significantly. So that's an example of one. Our investment in academic support and enhanced student success. We have funds that we're putting into our FastFlex nursing program so that we can have more students that are in it. It's more of a way that we can take advantage of nights and weekends for nurses that are wanting to go through school, and we can accommodate more nurses, but it takes an investment from us. We're also investing in the library. We're opening the library. There's expanded square footage for that. So there's just a couple of examples of the kinds of things we're talking about. And then forward-looking strategies. There's all kinds of things that we'll be doing to enhance our student success and to implement our Madison Promise. And so we'll be taking a look at all of that as well. So this is just a slide to say that we are committed to our educational quality. We're also committed to remaining one of the most affordable institutions in the Commonwealth. And you'll see that because I'm going to show you some comparisons. We want to make sure that we have appropriate financial aid and just that we constantly make efforts to enhance our operational efficiency. I'll give you an example. When we started talking about inflation and cost to continues, I got about $3 million worth of requests from people. It's predominantly software licenses that just go up every single year. I can only fund about half of that. So all of those departments had to figure out a way to tighten their belts and come up with covering those costs, because we know that you just can't pass everything off. So these are the ranges for what we are proposing. I want to be very clear here. These are ranges. I'm not saying that we're going to go to, for instance, the undergraduate Virginia tuition, the range is 0 to 3%, which is, it could be 0, it could be $250. So just don't leave thinking that you're automatically gonna go to the top of the range. We're required to just provide a range, so that's what I'm doing. So, for undergraduate students, the tuition increase is between 0 and 250, which is $125 per semester, or 0 to 3%. For an out-of-state student, it's 0 to 2%, or 0 to 512 annually. For graduate, the percentages are the same. For an in-state, it's 3%, 0 to 3%, and for an out-of-state, it's 0 to 2%. For the comprehensive fee, all full-time students pay the same comprehensive fee, whether they're in-state or out-of-state, and we're proposing a range of 0 to 4.5%. So that the increase could be anywhere from 0 to $268 annually, or $134 a semester. And for graduate students, it's 0 to 3.7%, which is a $0 to $2 per credit hour charge. We also do summer at this time. So this, I'm talking about summer for next year, not this summer. This summer's rates are already set, but the percentages are the same. For an undergraduate, it's 0 to 3%. For an out-of-state undergraduate, 0 to 2%, and it's the same for graduate students. And then the required auxiliary student fee is 0 to $1 per credit hour, which is 0 to 3.5%. So this is a chart that I show every year. I want to make sure that everybody looks at this and understands that a 1% charge at JMU is not the same as a 1% charge at some of our sister institutions, because this time of year, people will start reporting out on what their tuition increases are, and 3% at William and Mary is not the same as a 3% at JMU. So that's the point I want to make. A 1% increase at JMU is $84 for the year. A 1% increase for William and Mary is $194 for the year. But when you see this in the media, they'll talk about percentages, and if you see William and Mary went up 3% and say we did, you'd think it was the same, and it's not. There's a significant difference. You have to look at the dollars. And so I want to point that out. The bullet that's really telling is that our in-state tuition is 21% less than the average of the 15 public four-year institutions. So JMU is a bargain and a value for our students. This chart shows if we went up to the max of the range that I suggested, those are the gray, that's the JMU pieces, and it compares to all of the other institutions at their current rates. So once everybody sets their tuitions, and so far the only one that has is Virginia Tech. I think most of them are going like right around the time that we will next week, so we'll know a few. But if you this is our worst case scenario for the ranges that I gave you compared to everyone else's prices this year. So I expect we may flip with a few of them. But the two columns that I think are the most telling are the two to the far right, the undergraduate tuition and fees, the total. For an in-state student, as you can see, we're number 9. And then a total out-of-state, we're number 8. And again, I think we'll move a little bit depending on what folks do when they set their tuition and fees. So we're still way in the bottom of the 15 schools, so towards the bottom. So what is the student value? I mean, it's proven that students that go to college, they experience higher lifetime earnings. They have access to networks and internships that we talked about. There's personal development, specialized skills. We have a wide variety of student engagement opportunities and campus resources, and then our research opportunities. And that's one of the things that I didn't talk about, but we're actually putting more money into that. You know, we're an R2 institution now. That's something that we're very aware of and want to make sure that our students have those opportunities. And This concludes the presentation. Since no one asked to speak today, I just want to say that I appreciate you coming and I appreciate your interest.
Tawana, thank you and your team very much for putting all this information together, and the board will look forward to having a more intense conversation with you all next Thursday night when we meet to discuss and nail down what we're going to do for the next academic year. I
Thank
thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much, and I want to thank the board members and for the student rep, Sydney Stafford and Jeff Bolander. We have a couple of board members online, but I appreciate you all being with us today, and thank you for listening.
Well done.
Well done, Tawana.
Oh.